Hey, so I've been using both Gemini and Claude Code for real Android development for a couple of weeks. It's same project, same code bases, and what I wanted to tell you is what actually happened, because this is something that I personally didn't expect. Just to be clear, this isn't one of those benchmark videos where I paste the same prompt into both tools and compare the output side by side. I might do this later, and honestly, there's already like hundreds of those videos on YouTube. What I want to talk about instead is what is actually like to use those tools every day on real work, where they can help you, where they can completely break down, and ultimately which one I actually trust when I'm shipping production code today. So a little bit of the context for you first. I've been building an Android app called Alarm Quest. It's native Kotlin Jetpack Compose, nothing exotic, just a clear standard architecture. And I used Claude Code for most of the development, but I also spent a solid amount of time with Gemini because I generally wanted to see how it compares. It's the same project, same kind of task, like UI tweaks, bug fixes, preview for composable, all of this day-to-day stuff. And just so you know, I pay for both of these tools out of my own pocket, so I really don't have a reason to favor one over the other. This is purely based on what I personally experienced. So let's keep going and let's start with the Claude Code. So with Claude Code, the experience is honestly kind of boring, I should say. And I mean that in a good way, because when you configure it properly and you give it a task, it just does the task. You tell it to change a composable, for example, it changes the composable. You explain your project architecture and it actually respects it. It doesn't wander off and start touching things you never mentioned. And this predictability, when you're working on a real project with actual deadlines, that turns out to be everything for me. Now, look, I don't want to say that it's perfect. Yes, sometimes it doesn't really know the latest API, sometimes the code it writes is technically fine, but it's not quite how you would actually structure things in a real project. But here is what's important for me. When Claude Code makes a mistake, it's an obvious mistake. You see it in your code and you can fix it and just move on. It doesn't make your question your own sanity. I actually recorded myself building the entire Alarm Quest app with Claude Code, so if you're curious, that video is still on my channel. It's about an hour and a half of real work compressed into 17 minutes. But the takeaway is simple. With Claude Code, I always feel like I'm the one driving. The AI does what I ask, no more and more less. And that's really good feeling. Now, let's talk about Gemini. This is where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean generally frustrating. So here's what's happened. On Monday, I was working with Gemini on a bug with the system image picker, just an URI handling issue. So we just worked and fixed it together. Great, done, moved on. Then on Tuesday, I come back, I'm using the same session and I start working on something completely unrelated. Just some UI changes to a composable in totally different part of the project. It has nothing to do with the image picker whatsoever. So I asked Gemini to make this specific UI changes and it does. But then it also reapplies the image picker fix from yesterday, right in the same div, just mixed it with the new changes. So now I'm sitting and staring at the screen and a div that got my UI work tangled up with yesterday bug fix across multiple files, and I can't clearly tell what's new and what is old. Gemini just didn't understand that yesterday's problem was finished. It carried forward and merged everything together. And to make it worse, the thing that I actually asked for wasn't even done right. If you think about what that means on real project, you ask like for one simple UI tweak and suddenly the div touches the 5 files across 2 completely different features. So that's not just unhelpful, that's actually dangerous. With Claude Code, this never happened to me. Every task is isolated. You ask for X, you get X. There is no host context leaking in from conversations that you had 2 days ago. The second problem, and honestly this one probably bothered me even more, It's when I ask Gemini to write preview functions for a few composable components in my code base. And if you work with Jetpack Compose, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is like a preview annotated functions that basically lets you render your UI right inside Android Studio without spinning up the whole application. So Gemini generate the previews, and at first glance, everything looks reasonable. But then I try to build the project, and it fails. And reason for that Gemini just had invented data fields. It just made up properties that don't exist anywhere in my data classes. Field names I've never written, that aren't in my models, that aren't anywhere in my code base at all. It just fabricated sample data out of the thin air. And this isn't something obscure edge case, like generate a preview with sample data. It's about basic as it gets. Claude Code handles this just fine. It reads your actual data class, uses like real field names, fills in realistic values. It's great. I remember running into hallucinations issues like this with ChatGPT 3.5 a couple of years ago, but I generally didn't expect it to have this issue with Google's flagship model in 2026. So what's happened next is I had to go through every single preview, pull up my data model side by side, and manually fix each fabricated field. And that whole process ended up taking me longer than if I would written the previews from scratch, which completely defeats the purpose of using AI in the first place. So after using both tools on the same project, here's actually where I've landed. Gemini is actually a powerful tool. I want to be clear about that. Sometimes its suggestions are generally creative, and its massive context window lets it handle refactoring in a way that are honestly impressive. And when Claude Code will hit same context window with 1 million parameters, it will be not so strong argument for Gemini anymore, but still, it is what it is. But when it comes to production Android work, code that's like going to ship to real users on real devices, I need predictability more than I need creativity. I need to know that when I ask for a change, I get that change and only that change, not that change plus leftovers from yesterday's sessions. And I need to know that when I ask for sample data, it's using fields that actually exist in my code base. Because here's the thing, every minute I spend reviewing an AI mistakes, it's a minute I'm not spending building something useful, some features. And the entire point of using those tools is to go faster, right? So right now, for my daily work, Claude Code is the one I trust, not because it's necessarily smarter, but because it's reliably predictable, let's say, and in production that matters way more for me. Now, if you're an Android developer trying to figure out like which tool to go with, my honest advice is just try both. I mean that because every project is different, every person's workflow is different, and your results might generally look nothing like mine. But while you're testing, pay attention to these things I talked about. Does the tool mix up context between different tasks? Does it invent data that isn't in your code base at all? When you ask for one thing, do you get this one thing, or do you get this thing plus a bunch of changes you've never asked for? Because at the end of the day, in production work, trust beats benchmarks every time. A tool that aces some coding leaderboards, but then surprises you with unexpected behavior, that's a tool that's going to cost you time at the worst possible moment. Now, one more thing, I'm putting together a full breakdown of my entire AI setup for Android development. The prompts, the configs, what I actually use, what works and what doesn't. So if you want to get that when it's ready, I will drop a link in the description. If you run into similar things with Gemini or Claude Code, or honestly, if you think I'm completely wrong, leave a comment because I really do want to know what's working for other people, what's not. Maybe there is a way to configure Gemini that I'm missing. Maybe it's just my project, so I don't know, but you can tell me. And thanks for watching, subscribe, and I see you in the next one.